Happy holidays. This recipe is for a meal that is not the major meal of the holiday, but for the holiday season. Again, this would be something that you can have for a breakfast, you could have it for a lunch, but it's probably not going to hit the actual holiday table itself in the evening for the big meal. It's a corn frittata, and I'm going to start with about a tablespoon of vegetable oil. I've got a oven-proof skillet, so this one can go in the oven at 375. The oven is preheating at that temperature. I'm putting that in there, and then I'm going to use cremini mushrooms. Again, you can use button mushrooms, but the creminis give you more depth of flavor, and since this doesn't have a lot of ingredients that add a real punch to it, the first time I did it, I thought it was too bland. I wanted to use the mushrooms that are going to give me the most punch. Make sure when you use them, I've got about 6 ounces of mushrooms, which will give you about 2 cups. I've got a 10-inch skillet, and I want to make sure that they're not overlaying each other, that you've got a single layer of mushrooms in the skillet. You're going to let them heat and brown, and as they brown, you're going to see some liquid release, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. In addition to develop the added flavor to them, we want them to release the liquid that's here, because we don't want that to be released while they're heating in the oven. That's going to prevent our frittata from forming. So we're going to let them cook, and then we'll turn them over. We'll let them cook for 3 to 5 minutes until they get a good browning. Also going to add about 1/4 of a teaspoon of kosher salt, and that's going to also help some of that liquid come out. Just a little bit. If we don't use it all in here, we can always stir it in the rest of the frittata later. So I just want a little bit, help start to pull that out. Again, flip them as they begin to brown on the other side. And while that's going, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what a frittata is. Most of you probably know. We often see them with potatoes and other kinds of things, maybe pasta that's left over that you mix with eggs. They go into the oven. They're not quite an omelet. They're not quite a quiche, but they're kind of in between. Sort of like a quiche without the crust. So I've got a dozen eggs, and I'm going to whip those together until they're nicely blended, and then we'll just add the other ingredients to this. In general, the ratio that you use is 6 eggs, 1/4 of a cup of cream, a cup of cheese, and 2 cups of a combination of meat and or vegetable. You do the same kind of thing with that, then that can go into the skillet, and you can move it on into the oven and bake it for a little while. We're doing this one a little bit differently in that we're not using any cream. We are still going to use cheese. I'm using 12 eggs instead of 6, so we've got a little bit of a larger quantity. But our liquid instead of cream is coming from creamed corn, which doesn't actually have cream in it, but we'll provide the liquid in a thickened form that will work very well, that will marry very well with this. So I'm going to go back and work on the mushrooms, and we'll come back and finish this up when we get all the mushrooms done. At the first time I made this, I didn't think it had enough flavor, so I've done a little bit of experimentation, and I found that adding 1/2 of a jalapeno chopped up does a nice job for somebody like me who doesn't like it excessively spicy. But you could boost it even more. You could put in more jalapeno. You could put in some hot sauce. There are lots of things you can do to this to improve the flavor. I'm adding it a little bit before the mushrooms are done because I want to saute it just a tad. It's going to cook in the oven for quite a while, so if there's not a lot that's happening, that's going to be okay. All right, I'm putting all these out. I want them to cool down before I add them to the egg mixture because I don't want them to try to cool that. So spread them out. You don't need to go so far as put them in the refrigerator. They don't have to get chilled. You just don't want them hot any longer. So that's the reason that they're there cooling down. We're going to use the same pan going into the oven. Now you could use, a lot of people would use for this, a seasoned cast iron skillet or a non-stick cast iron skillet. This is just a regular non-stick skillet, but it is safe for the oven at the temperature that we're going to use it now, so that you can use that as well. The thing that you need to be cautious about is with a cast iron skillet, you can really crank the heat up underneath it, and it's not a problem to the pan. With most of the non-stick skillets, like the one I've got here, cranking the heat up really high can break down that non-stick coating on you. So read the directions that come with your skillet first of all, and put it up no more than like a medium high, which is what I was using. The next thing I want to do is wipe it out a little bit, and through hard luck and hard knocks of the school of life, I've discovered that just doing this and wiping it around, the oil tends to go through the paper and cause a little bit of discomfort in the form of a burn. So if you use your tongs, it's the same thing that you do when you're cleaning a grill. We don't want to wipe it off completely. We want to keep some of that oil that we had on there because we want to have it continue to be a good nonstick surface. And the oil in there at that point will just add to it. So that's the reason we're doing that. Okay, we have our 12 eggs here. I didn't use quite all the salt before, so I'm going to add the rest of the half a teaspoon of salt in here. I also have just a commercial can of cream corn. Now, if you've got your own cream corn that you prepared this summer and canned, use about 2 cups. And remember, that's providing some of the starch that we need. It's also providing part of the 2 cups or the vegetable ratio that we need. And I'm going to whisk those together a little bit. Whisking works fine until you get something like a shredded cheese, and then the whisk is not probably going to be your favorite tool. So I'm going to give it up at this point because I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of chopped green onion to this as well. You could use chives if you had those instead, and then I'm just going to stir those together. Then we're going to stir in 2 ounces of grated Parmesan, which is going to be around somewhere between a cup, half a cup, somewhere in that area. You can mark it the first time that you do it, and then you'll know exactly how much you need. But in general, the frittata is not something that you need to heavily worry about some of the ingredients and getting the ratio exactly right. Let me check the temperature on our mushrooms. Yeah, they've cooled down fine. See, it doesn't take very long. We'll stir those in along with the jalapeno. And then we're just going to put them back in the pan that we were working with to begin with. And then it's going to go in our 350-degree oven for somewhere between 30 and 35 minutes. A lot of this, again, can be done ahead of time. I'm just going to stir it around in the pan just a little bit just to make sure that the mushrooms are well blended. You could do something very similar with leftover meats. If you have leftover ham, for instance, this would be a great way to use some leftover ham. This one could be called vegetarian because we haven't added any dairy products. Depends on what kind of vegetarian you are. You have to be one who's willing to eat eggs and cheese. We do have dairy products. All right, I'm going to get this in the oven. I'm going to open it first, and we'll be back in about 35 minutes to show you what it looks like when it's done. After this comes out of the oven, you want to make sure that it's set before you take it out. You can insert a knife into the center of it. If it comes out fairly clean, that's good, or you can just jiggle it. If it's fairly stable, that's good too. But let it set for about 5 minutes before you try and remove it from the pan, just to give it time to let that structure set and make sure that it's not going to slide around on you. Once it's done, this is what it looks like. It makes 6 servings. You can either eat them all at one time with a group. You can put them in the refrigerator. It's one of those things that actually tastes better the day after. So if you want to make it up and then serve it like you would a quiche, reheat it a little bit, or actually serve it at room temperature. It's great. I think you'll find it a great addition to your holiday season. It's Corn Frittatta for Oklahoma Gardening. I'm Barbara Brown.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.